Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Now, I've been trying to get the Dodge running for quite a while now, and I gave up trying to figure it out myself, joined a forum called Dodge Forum, and got help there. Well, they figured it out in a few days what was wrong, and apparently it's the computer. I ordered a 91 computer when I needed a 92, because this is a Magnum series engine, so only started in 92. So, while I do that, I do want to do some other work to get this at least ready for the road when I get the computer. So I have a few things I need to do. I need to fix the wiring, or at least clean it up a little bit, just so it's not as dangerous. Maybe remove the light switches. I need to fix the fuel gauge because that doesn't work. I need a rear seat, which I do have the original ones. And around the back, I need a trunk latch, because it's not really good when you can see right through the trunk. So those four things should get it to the point where it's able to get on the road and do everything I need to do as a car. So I think today I want to start with the fuel gauge, because it's one of the more important ones. Like, I don't need rear seats to drive, and I don't need, well, that wiring would be nice to get rid of, but fuel gauge, just because it's such a big engine, I want to make sure I actually have enough gas to get home. So I'm going to start off with that. A little while ago, I already went through the pain of figuring out the wiring in this. I do have to put a little wrap on that. Same with all the ones over there. But I know what all the wiring is because I went through it. So this blue yellow wire, that is the fuel gauge. So if I follow that, it leads into this, the black wire, which leads into this. It's one of these. I don't know. Regardless of what one it is, I'm gonna try and get at least one of the fuel gauges working. That one I'd kind of like to get working, but I feel like it might be this one that's gonna be used. Because underneath, let's see if I can slide down and show you. I don't know if you can see that, but underneath there's a lot more wiring. Yeah, that thing right there. That's all the wiring. But if I go underneath here, I don't know if you can see. Actually, I might be able to show you from here. In here's the wiring for the other one. It's somewhere up there. It's, for this one, there's like 7 or so wires. For this one, there's 2. So I'm gonna use that one. You're joining me underneath the dash, and we can see the back of the 2 clusters. On the right is the fuel gauge, so the one where my finger's touching, and over here is the temp gauge. Now the fuel gauge has a green wire, the end I'm touching of right here, and that is the positive. The like woven wire is the ground, because it goes from there, pops over to here, and then runs off of that down to what I think is the key. That little cluster of bolts and wires right there. So what we need to do is manage to splice a wire onto both of those so we can get a an actual signal, or at least a current running across them. And if everything goes well, then it'll work, and that gauge will actually show me how much fuel I have, which would be very nice. It took a little bit of time, but I got both of the wires opened up at the ends. I've got, I don't even know what you'd call it. I removed the wrapping at the end. You can kind of see it poking through there. Right here, tip my finger. And the ground one somewhere, I don't, right around here. So now that that's done, I can start splicing in the other wires for the fuel pump, and this one just has to be a ground, so I'm just gonna have to ground that. I'll probably do it straight to the battery, or at least to the body. But the green wire, I actually have to find the wire coming from the fuel pump. So I'm gonna get that and get those ready to be spliced. I've got the wire coming from the fuel pump cut open. It was in this wrap of wires that conveniently opened like pretty well right underneath the dash. So I'm just gonna splice some random wire I found in the back shed to there, and then I'm gonna have to splice it underneath here as well, and I'm probably gonna tape it up too, just to make sure it doesn't ground out on anything. There's not that much voltage, so I don't really care about that, but I'm gonna do that, and hopefully I'll be back if I have any issues. The first wire is all spliced up, and you can hardly even tell it's there. I ran it straight up and across all of the things in here, including the steering shaft. So now it's, yeah, you can see it there. Spliced up nice. So now all I have left to do is to get the ground, of which is a little shorter. So it's going to be a little bit harder to do. But once I get that end spliced, I think I'm just going to run it through the firewall and over to the battery. Or if I find any spot sooner than that. But that's just the plan I have right now. So I'm going to get that done. Hopefully everything goes well. And with that, it should let the fuel gauge work. I have the ground wire for the fuel gauge hooked up in the engine bay. I had to do a little bit of rerouting. Found a new screw. Just a little bit of cleaning up some wiring. But now, the end of it's right there, so all I have to do is put one of the little rubber things, whatever you call those, insulators, shrink wrap, that's what it is. Have to put one of those on there, and it should be as easy as just twisting the wire together and holding a flame under it for a second. So I'm going to do that. Hopefully fuel gauge works. I got it all wired up, and there's a problem I didn't really think of. The fuel sender in the fuel pump doesn't actually work, because I turned it on and I was just messing around with the float, and it wasn't doing anything, and I went, huh, that's weird. So I hooked it up to my light switch just to see if it would do anything, and if I turn it on, it works. The problem is out back, I have it hot wired all together because apparently this does not work. You can have it at whatever you want, it just doesn't do anything. Which would explain why the original fuel gauge didn't work. And I don't know how I can get along to fixing that. I do know how they work though. It should just be a series of wires going, and where this is depends on how much resistance there is. So this should be, that should be like a complete circuit connection, like it connects it completely. But that should be, it has a lot of resistance to go through, so it doesn't move the gauge that much. I think that's how it works. I'm not familiar with stuff this new. Also, anybody who's ever worked on this car is an absolute idiot, including me, because we all thought it was a 91. It says right on the fuel pump, 92,318. So, that solves that problem. But now I have to figure out how to solve this one. So, I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the fuel pump out completely and see if I can actually pull this apart. Because it's just clipped in here. So, see if I can get that apart and see if maybe I can fix it. I figured out what's wrong with the fuel pump. I also figured out how this works. Power comes across here. This is always powered, then it transfers over these tabs, and the ground part is resisted. So, that's cool. So when you have it like here, this is empty. Power travels across here, has to go through this top layer, but it has a lot of resistance, so by the time it gets to the gauge, it can't move it. And this is the other case where it has a clean route, so it has enough power to actually show full on the gauge. So I'm glad I figured that out. And the reason why this isn't working is because whoever wired this did it upside down. I was thinking about it, and I couldn't figure out how power was getting into the system. So I was just backtracking all of the wiring, and I found out that this is ground. So all of, like, this is ground, and that's connected to this. But this is the positive wire. This is the output. It's not connected to the actual positive, which is correct. But I was trying to think, like, how does this work? Because there's no way power can get in. This should be flipped upside down. Where this wire is connected going into the ground, this should have been over here. And these two wires that are separate should have been over here. Which is why the fuel gauge on the original dash just never worked. It's also why I couldn't figure out how this was working, because I didn't see any sort of damage. It is working, there's just no power. So I'm glad I figured that out, and now I just have to figure out a way to flip these around, because these two wires connected, that has to be power coming in, and then the output should be this wire, which explains why it's just never worked. So glad I figured that out, and I'm just going to spend the next bit of time just kind of rewiring all of that, making sure that actually works, and hopefully that'll let the fuel gauge work, and then I'll actually be able to switch it over to the regular dash, or the regular glove box dash. So might have to continue this layer though. I think it's about to rain, but for now I'm glad I figured that out. So I'll be back whenever I get that wiring done. It's the next day, and I spent a little bit of time getting all of this rewired, but should all be good. The positive, there's actually power going into the positive side now, and the grounds are separated. This one was a bit tricky. There was 3 heat shrinks on it. One of them may be me. And there was like some caulking sealant in there. I'm not sure. You can still kind of see it on there. Anyway, these two wires were pretty well fused together, so I just had to cut that one a little short. But with that hopefully should put some power back into the system. And there's still some wires back there that I have to fix up, but those are fine for now, because I just need to make sure that this actually has power. So I'm gonna go up to the front and see if there's anything now. So it's all hooked up, and if I flip my little light switch, hold up, there. Though you might see a problem here. How that went to full, the tank is empty. And I know why. I searched it up, and this car came out during the transition of 6 volt to 12 volt. So there's a very good chance that this car is 6 volt, which would explain why when I put power, a tiny bit of 12 volt power to the fuel gauge, it shoots right to full. Because look how fast this goes. I missed it, but you can see how fast that shoots up. There is no way that gauge was supposed to handle 12 volts. So that's a shame, but at least I figured out this was a 12 volt car. And it kind of makes sense. It was one of the cheaper cars from Dodge, so. Now that it is 12 volt though, guess I'm gonna just try and go off of the gauge in here, because that one won't work, and I'm not smart enough to know how to convert 12 volts to 6 volts, if that even is possible. So I'm just going to cut the orange wire and hook the blue one back up to where it is, and hopefully that should fix the fuel gauge though. So I'm gonna do that and I'll be done. I got the wire connected back up, batteries hooked up, Now it's time to see if it actually works. I still have to use my light switch for the fuel pump. And nothing. Oh, it moves a tiny bit. Huh. I know my wiring is correct because that gauge was flipping out with the exact same wiring. So everything should be hooked up correctly. The the dash should be fine. Maybe it might have something to do that I'm using a light switch and it's not getting power from the computer. I don't know. It might be something weird like that. Like it has to ground somewhere weird, or I don't know. Maybe the computer puts out a different voltage for it. I really don't know. That's weird that it doesn't turn on. Huh. Well, I have no idea what to do about that. I really thought that would work, and it kind of does. Like you can see it moving a tiny bit. I don't know. Maybe the computer has something to do with it. I have the old computer hooked up, hoping that it would put out enough voltage, but it doesn't. All it does is make a little humming sound. Actually, turn the key on first. Maybe that'll change some. I think it's moving. Hold up. I gotta get that. It's definitely moving. Oh, my lights down here came on. Huh. I don't know. Maybe something with the computer, but for now the wiring is correct, so that might be something I just have to think about later on. But for now, hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you in the next one.